literally where I got my personality this year. I don't know who I would be without these books. Everything you love about me, I got from these books. Coming up at number 3, numero 3, we have... Okay, no, but are you for real? Like, is this really the end of 2022? It feels like 2022 has single-handedly been the longest and the shortest year of my entire life. I feel like it went by like this, but also where did all the time go? Like, I don't know, it just feels like this weird time vortex, and I don't know how to feel about it yet, but you know what it means. The end of the year content. I cannot let 2022 end without letting you guys know about my top books of the year. Yes, I don't know how I did it, but I managed to organize my top 10 favorite books of 2022. And here they all are. Before we get talking about all of these amazing books, be sure to leave your predictions in the comments below. Obviously, we all know what that one book is because of the symbols that it has on the pages. But apart from that very obvious book, let me know what other books you think are here. As you can see, there are some books that just have an atrocious amount of tabs. I am just so stupidly excited to talk to you guys about these books because these are literally where I got my personality this year. I don't know who I would be without these books. They got me through the hardest parts of the year. They gave me all of my good jokes. Like, everything you love about me, I got from these books. Without further ado, let's just get into my top 10 books of 2022. Coming up at number 10, we have Fragments of Horror, written by Mr. Junji Ito. Junji Ito has very easily become my favorite horror manga author or artist because there are no limits to his imagination, and you can never guess how twisted and unique his stories are going to be. Even though I have read quite a few short story collections from Junji Ito this year, I feel like Fragments of Horror does such a fantastic job of showcasing his talent and just how horrifying his imagination can be, and there truly is no limit to what he can come up with. He is not afraid of literally anything at all. He is willing to go to the darkest places of his soul. He's willing to explore so many dark topics, and I don't know what it is about him, but I'm just in love with his artistry, and his storytelling is just fantastic and beautiful, and I'm so excited to see what he has in store for us in 2023. My very first favorite book of 2022 is a horror manga by my favorite horror manga artist, Junji Ito. If you have no idea where to begin with Junji Ito, I would highly recommend Fragments of Horror, and I would also recommend Deserter, which is my second favorite short story collection, which I also read this year, but Fragments of Horror just takes the cake in my opinion, and the art is just, he outdid himself. It's creepy, it's horrifying, it's everything. Just like flipping through it, I can feel my skin crawling because it's just so horrifying. It's kind of amazing. Look at those hanging heads. No, like, exactly. So there we go. Beautiful Junji Ito, fantastic. Amazing, wonderful. Let's continue. Coming up at number 9, we actually have a non-fiction book, and I am definitely surprised by that turn of events because I'm not the biggest non-fiction reader, but in 2022 I actually read some really amazing memoirs, and one of those memoirs is actually my 9th favorite book of 2022, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I cannot be the only person that's going to mention this book in their favorites list because this book took the world by storm. If you're not familiar with this book, this is the story of Jennette McCurdy, and she speaks to us about the childhood that she never had, and it mostly centers around the abuse that she received from her mom, both emotional and mental and psychological, and how her life has turned out because of everything that she went through while she was growing up. So it's definitely not a lighthearted read. It's not something something that you can pick up and kind of like laugh. You know, it's not that kind of book. It deals with a lot of heavy topics like eating disorders and depression, anxiety, grooming, child abuse. It's just, you know, it's not the brightest of books. Even though the cover is like pink and yellow, you know, it's not gonna fill your heart with rainbows and sunshine. It's going to do quite literally the opposite. But I just fell in love with this book, even though it is so dark and deals with such heavy and hard-hitting topics. I feel like this was just an incredible way of telling your story, and it was just her way of processing things, and it was such a deeply personal story and also reading experience. And even months later after reading this book, I was still thinking about it. So this definitely deserves a spot on my top 10 books of 2022, and I would highly recommend you guys read this if you're able to. Of course, not everybody can read about topics like this, but if you're not triggered by the content, I would highly recommend that you read I'm Glad My Mom Died. Coming up at number 8, we have another manga. And now listen, this is the last manga on the list, but I just really, honestly, I could not let this video pass by without mentioning this manga, because I actually finished this series this year and I'm still kind of emotional about it. Like, if I think about it too hard, I get really emotional and I get teary-eyed, because I just feel like I've been collecting this series for so long. These characters along the way, they just started to feel like family. The fact that there's not going to be another new volume, at least in this story, it's just, it kind of messes with my mental health, but I'm okay. I'm fine most of the time. Number 8 is reserved for Demon Slayer. I'm holding up volume 23 because this is the last one of this series. And I just remember when I finished this, I was actually doing a Patreon reading sprint, and I was trying, I was trying my hardest to not let my Patreons know that I was currently sobbing my eyes out, and I did a really bad job. Like, it's so clear that I was crying, my eyes were red, I was snotting all over. I was like, I cannot do this. How am I supposed to remain professional while I have tears leaking down my face? Demon Slayer was such an amazing ride. The story, the characters, it's just so deeply engraved in my heart. It's right up there with Full Metal Alchemist, which is my all-time favorite anime and manga. And this is probably like spot 3 or 2. I'm still sort of, you know, is it Jujutsu, is it Demon Slayer? But Demon Slayer, just, I had to mention Demon Slayer because I spent so long collecting this manga, and this series just holds so many wonderful memories for me. So of course, I had to mention it on my top books of 2022. I'm gonna miss you so much. Like, don't even look at me. I'm gonna miss her. Coming up at number 7, we have a very obvious book. If you've seen the symbols, then you know that number 7 is The Starless Sea, written by Erin Morgenstern. This was my very first Erin Morgenstern book, and I remember before I read this, I was so skeptical. I was like, am I going to like this? Because I've heard so many mixed reviews, and a lot of my close friends were like, you're not gonna like it. Like, you're not. So my expectations were super low. I was like, I'm probably going to have an okay time with this, but at least I got like a cute edition out of it. You know what I mean? Like, this is a gorgeous edition. Let me just show. Like, look, that is just stunning. It's beautiful. But when I actually read this, oh my god, I know one friend of mine is going to be so disappointed that this book is in this list because they absolutely hate this book. But I am the complete opposite. I feel like this book reshaped my world. I feel like it rewired my whole brain chemistry. I loved how unique and how absolutely bonkers this book is. Like, I don't understand how Erin Morgenstern wrote this and made it make sense, because in a way it's such a convoluted story that I can't even begin to explain to you what this book is about. Basically, there's this book, right? And we have our main character, Zachary, and when he finds this book and he starts reading it, he starts to realize that this book is about him. This book is narrating his own life, his childhood, his teenage years, and as he keeps on reading, he starts to read about events that haven't happened yet. So he starts to kind of like lose it. He's like, what is going on? Am I dead? Is this a hallucination? What is going on? And then besides the book, there's also a doorway into this wonderful whole new world. And it's just such a fantastical and lyrical and beautiful story about books and storytelling and love and romance. This book was about so many things, and honestly, I think the best way to go into it is knowing as little as possible, because I went into this book blind with low expectations, not knowing what was waiting for me at the end of this book. And look at us now. I have a new favorite book, and I cried, I laughed, I felt this book become so much more than just a simple book. Like, you know, those books that you start and you're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a nice read. But then you keep on reading and you start to realize like, oh, this book is a lot more than just another book. Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me with The Starless Sea, and I'm so grateful that I read this book because it's beautiful. And I feel like if you're a fan of Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, you're really going to love The Starless Sea. The writing is there, the world building, the characters, it's just all there, you know what I mean? So yeah, The Starless Sea, spot number 7 on my top 10 books of 2022. And then we have, okay, listen, this next book, number 6, listen, just looking at it, I'm transformed into this preteen girl that has the biggest crush, and she's just turned into this mess of giggles, and it's like having a crush. This is what having a crush feels like, except without all of the awkward things that come along with having a crush. I'm gonna just show it to you. Like, I keep talking about it, but I haven't even shown you the book. I can still remember so clearly one sunny day in March when my Patreons and I decided to read From Lukov with Love as our March Patreon buddy read, and I just completely lost it. This was my very first Mariana Zapata book, and before I picked up this book, I was just like, people are being so dramatic. People are exaggerating just how good of an author Mariana Zapata is. Like, it can't be that good. I have never been so happy to be so wrong before. I don't know what Mariana Zapata laces her books with. I don't know if it's actually, I don't want to get demonetized, so I'm not going to be naming any drugs, but I just know there's some kind of substance inside of these books, because the second that I pick up a Mariana Zapata book, I cannot put it down. It's like page 1, I'm sucked in. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be my life for the next 4 hours. I don't know how this is possible. Definitely do not try this at home, but Mariana Zapata manages to make me read a 500-page book in one sitting. And when I say one sitting, I mean one sitting. Like, I don't even get up for water. Not that I drink water anyways, but I don't get up for bathroom breaks. I don't do anything at all except move my eyeballs from right to left. From right to left? From left to right? I'm sorry, how do I read? From left to right. Yes, as you can see, my brain is no longer wired. From Lukov with Love, how do I even begin to explain how this book made me believe in love again? Like, before I read From Lukov with Love, I just thought I wasn't really that into romance. I just thought, oh, the romance genre isn't really for me. I hadn't really read that many romance books that had left me like, oh my god, this is my favorite thing in the whole wide world. But after From Lukov with Love, I realized that I just hadn't read the right books. And now I am such a simp for romance books. I feel like romance genre single-handedly saved 2022 for me. This book is the epitome of a serotonin boost. This made my motivation to live skyrocket. It made me want to keep on living just so that I could find more books like From Lukov with Love. One of my favorite things of Mariana Zapata books is that it's not just only about the romance. We're also focusing on the character growth and the character arc that they have to go through, the things that they have to experience. And it's such a clear distinction from the person that they were at the beginning of the book to the person that they are at the end. And if you know me, you know I'm big on characters. I think characters again, are the backbone of a story. If you don't have good characters, it's impossible to have a good story, in my opinion. In my personal experience, a lack of good characters makes for a lack of a good story. No matter how unique the story can be, if you don't have good characters, you don't have anything. In this book, we're following our main character, Yasmin, and she's currently struggling a lot with her self-confidence. She's been ice skating for almost all her life, and recently she's just been having these bouts of failure. She doesn't really believe that she's got it, and she's honestly thinking about quitting. But suddenly she gets this one-in-a-lifetime chance to skate again and to prove her own worth. But there's a slight catch. She has to do it with like her #1 enemy, Ivan Lukov. And of course, that is basically the premise for one of the best enemies to lovers books that I've read in my entire life. Like, I wish I could erase my mind and read this book again, because this book gave me so much comfort and it gave me so much joy. Seeing these characters grow into themselves and also become the best versions of themselves possible because they're together, that's one of my favorite. Like, I love this book so much, my dude, and I just wish I could read it for the first time. And I'm definitely going to have to reread this soon because I loved it so much. I read this in one sitting, as I mentioned, and I didn't even stop to annotate. Compared to, for example, this looks disgusting. I definitely need to reread this so that I can properly annotate this and properly give it the love that it deserves. So enough about From Lukov with Love. Let's move on before I just make this whole video about From Lukov with Love. Let's move on to the 5th spot in this top 10 list. I hope you've written down your predictions in the comments below, and you are not allowed to edit them. Just, you know, be real. If you don't know me, you don't know me, but make your predictions down below, because now we're getting into the final 5 of this top 10 list. What do you think is going to be number 5? Because I'm looking at it right now and she's looking right back, and I'm so excited. I think this is a pretty obvious choice. I have a whole reading vlog, well, a whole segment of a reading vlog dedicated to this book, because I actually read this book in a reading challenge when I was reading as one of my favorite booktubers, which is Books with Chloe, or she recently changed her user, so it's now Chloe Bunny. Thanks to her, I found one of my newest favorite books of all time, and that is, drumroll please, Normal People, written by Sally Rooney. I have a whole vlog of me just crying over Normal People. I was so close to not including the clips of me crying over this book, but honestly, these videos are almost like this digital diary for me. I can look back on them and I can reminisce about how some books made me feel, the physical reaction that I have to some of them. Normal People is definitely one of the books that made me cry the hardest this year. It was a deeply personal experience. I actually added a post-it with all the trigger warnings, so we should definitely get those out of the way. Depression, suicide, suicidal thoughts, eating disorders, anorexia, physical and emotional abuse, attempted sexual assault, alcohol and drugs. Yeah, it's definitely a very heavy book. It deals with very serious and heavy topics. It's not the most lighthearted of romances. I wouldn't even call this a romance, and if it is, it's a very twisted and sad one. This just does such a really good job at portraying human emotions and the reality that sometimes people hurt other people and it's not always going to work out. But I think that through all of the pain and all of the torture and all of the emotional abuse that we go through in this book, the story is very relatable. I know that so many people hate that these characters don't communicate, but sadly, that's how it is for a lot of us. Like, we don't know how to use words to explain what we're feeling. It's not that we want to miscommunicate, it's just that we literally never learned how to. We don't have healthy coping mechanisms, and I think that this book does a great job at portraying the darker sides of humanity and how sometimes we try our best and that is still not enough. some of the lines in this book and some of the moments just hurt me so much because they felt like Sally Rooney looked directly into me and she was like, okay, I'm gonna make your pain into art and I'm gonna put it in a book. I feel like that's what Sally Rooney did, and I feel like that's why this book hurt me so much, and it had such a big impact on me because it just spoke to parts of my soul that I didn't know were abandoned or that needed reassurance and validation. Sally Rooney did that, and because of that, Normal People has such a special place in my heart. The writing is very peculiar. Sally Rooney definitely has a very distinct tone and a very distinct writing style, but I loved it. This was my first Sally Rooney and I loved it. Like, I get it. I'm one of the girls that get it, finally. Like, I never get to be one of the girls that get it, but for this one, I totally get it, babes. Totally get it. Coming up at number 4, this is a book that I read this month, actually, so it's a very late addition to my list, but I don't see 2022 being complete without this book. So I'm so happy that I made the time to read this one because, oh my god. I also have a vlog for this one, thank god. Like, I'm so happy I've documented most of these books because, as I mentioned in the beginning, these books make up my 2022 DNA, and the fact that I have footage of how these books made me feel and what I thought as I was reading them, it's, what's that word when like no amount of money could do this? It's literally priceless. Thank you so much. The 4th spot in this list belongs to Chain of Iron. Chain of Iron, written by Cassandra Clare. Look at this baby. Oh my god. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, exactly. Chain of Iron is the sequel to Chain of Gold, and this is the 2nd book in the series The Last Hours, which the 3rd and final book is coming out in January. So I'm so excited because it's like the perfect birthday gift. January is my birthday month, so I feel like Cassandra Clare specifically chose January as a gift to me. So thank you, Cassie. In this series, we're following the children of some of the characters in past Shadowhunter series, specifically the Infernal Devices. So if you're a fan of Will Herondale and Tessa and Jem Carstairs and Charlotte, like the whole gang of the Infernal Devices, if you love them, you're going to absolutely just fall head over heels in love with this series as well. Some of my favorite Shadowhunter characters are in this series, and I've just loved seeing them growing up and becoming the best versions of themselves, and seeing them fall in love, seeing them fall out of love, seeing them get hurt, but still come out on top. I also find the villain of this series really interesting because it's not as easy as just black and white. We definitely have some morally gray characters in this series, and you know, I'm a sucker for morally gray anything, so best believe I'm having the time of my life reading this series. And when I read Chain of Iron, I just absolutely lost it. I read this book in like 2 days. Like, I could not put it down. You know, this is a big thing for me. I actually sacrificed my sleep to finish Chain of Iron. I think I went to sleep like at 2 a.m. because I just did not want to put this down. And you know, it's not often that I get those types of books where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just not going to go to sleep because I have to know how this book ends. I think in 2022 that happened around maybe 4 or 5 times, including this time. I loved it so much. It definitely became a very big part of my personality. Sometimes, one thing that I love to do, I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but sometimes when I'm struggling in life in general with things that I have to do, I like to pretend that I am one of my favorite characters of one of my favorite books. Whenever I'm struggling with something, or whenever I just need like a little extra comfort, a little extra push, I pretend I'm Cordelia Carstairs because she is one of the bravest characters that I know. So I know when I'm struggling, if I pretend that I'm Cordelia Carstairs, I'm no longer going to struggle because she's right there with me. I find a lot of comfort in these books, and the amount of joy and love and happiness that I get from reading them is just unparalleled. So number 4, Chain of Iron. Who is surprised? Hopefully nobody. All right, we're up, we're here. The last 3 books. If you've been following this channel since January, I feel like you're gonna have a good idea of what these top 3 books are going to be. If you saw my October wrap up as well, you know what, I'm just gonna stop. Like, okay, I'm gonna stop hinting and I'm just gonna show you. Coming up at number 3, whew, are you ready? Let me let this helicopter pass through. Coming up at number 3, numero 3, we have, okay, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. No, but when I tell you that my whole life changed when I read Book Lovers, I cannot even begin to explain just how big of a change this book had on me and my life and my relationships with people. This blew every other romance book that I read out of the park, out of the lake, home run. You know what I mean? Like, any sports reference they want to make, Book Lovers is it. Like, just looking at it, my heart is just full of joy. And I remember when I read it and all of the times that I giggled, that I laughed, that I cried, that I kicked my feet up on the air because I was just so giddy reading this book. I remember just my stomach being full of butterflies and wishing that I were Nora or that I had a Charlie at least. You know what I mean? If you saw my 5-star book predictions video, then you know that Book Lovers was on that list, and I love being right. You know what I mean? Like, I just knew this was going to be a 5-star. It looks like a 5-star, it smells like a 5-star, and it is a 5-star. I did give this 5 out of 5 stars, but if I didn't break my rating system, I would give this book 10 out of 5 stars because it's what it deserves. It's literally groundbreaking. It's a trendsetter, it's an icon, it's a legend.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before, unafraid to reference or not reference, put it in a blender.
You know what I mean? Like, exactly. When Taylor Jenkins Reid said that this was a rom-com lover's dream of a book, she is not wrong. And, you know, me, myself, and I am a huge lover of rom-coms, so I know what I'm talking about. And I know that this is a dream. This is the rom-com lover's book, and I just In Book Lovers, we have these 2 characters, Nora and Charlie, and Nora is an agent, Charlie is a book editor, and they have clashing personalities, to say the least. They sort of get off on the wrong foot, and they're not exactly enemies, but they're not exactly friendly. And as fate would have it, they have this project that they have to work on together, and events occur, and now they have to be in close proximity even though they don't really want to be. But of course, sparks start flying, and chemistry is just one thing that you can never ignore, no matter how hard you try. If you love Taylor Swift, hi Swifties, you've listened to Midnights, obviously, and there's this one song that's called Glitch. This is their song. Taylor Swift definitely read Book Lovers, and she wrote Glitch for Nora and Charlie, so I just, yeah. Like, no doubt about it, this book had to be on my top 10 list of 2022 because, yeah, it just had to be. Like, no explanation needed. It just had to be on this list. Number two, have you placed your bets? Have you placed your bets? Because it's time to announce what my second favorite book of 2022 is, or was, or is. Yes. I read this book in January, so I started off the year extremely strong, as you can see. We did have a couple of missteps here and there, you know. I am going to be making a worst books of 2022 video, so stay tuned for that. But my second favorite book of the year, come on, second spot, 2022, second favorite book of the year, Alone with You in the Ether, written by Olivie Blake, a love story. Listen, I remember being so incredibly broken by this book, but the thing is, this book broke me and then put me back together. I went through such a whirlwind of emotions reading this book because I fell in love with them I fell out of love, I hurt, I cried, I laughed, I became this whole other new person. Like, the imprint that this book left on me is still very present on my soul. I think that it's so high up on my list because this book came at the perfect time for me. January, or just like the beginning of 2022 in general, was a very hard moment in my life. Aww. So the fact that I read this book at the perfect time, you can't make that up. It feels like destiny. It felt like fate. I feel like this book does such an incredible job at looking inside of me and putting into words things that I've never been able to talk about. There are very few books, like just a handful of books, that have managed to give me a voice or like help me find my own voice, and Alone with You in the Ether is one of those books. This is a character-driven story, so honestly there's not much going on here. It's, you know, it's mostly vibes, you know what I mean? I've said it countless times and I even repeated it on this video. I'm a very character-driven girly, and the fact that there's no plot didn't deter me from giving this book 5 stars. It didn't stop me from completely falling in love with this book. And yes, it's painful, yes, it hurts, but also it's such a beautiful showcase of humanity and love as well. Like, this is not your typical love story, is what I'll tell you for sure. It's just, if you have an idea of what this book is about, you're probably wrong. We're literally just following these two characters as they meet and as they fall in love, and inevitably as they fall apart. Ay, Dios mío. Like, just reading back on the tabs that I've placed, it hurts. It literally hurts, but I love the pain. Oh, you love my brain? Well, do you love it when it does this thing or this thing? Do you love it when it means I'm lifeless on the floor, curling my tongue around a pill or a stranger's? Can you love my brain even when it is small, when it is malevolent, when it's violent? Can you love it when it doesn't love me? I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on. I am not gonna move on. Coming up, oh my god, my dude, we made it. We are in the last spot of my list of my top 10 books of 2022. I can't believe we're here. We're here. We are here. It's literally impossible for me to make this list and not have this book in the #1 spot. And that is none other than Babel, or Babel, if you're feeling fancy, by R.F. Kuang, the one, the only R.F. Kuang. Babel, or The Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. I read this in October, and on my wrap-up, I actually said that this was either going to be my #1 or my #2 book of the year. And look at us now. #1 spot, Babel, what she deserves, where she belongs. I will never get over the amount of tabs that this book has, and I just love it because this book feels like a classic in the making. And if you've been on Twitter recently or just Instagram, then you sort of know the waves that this book is making and the discourse that is starting to happen because of this book. This book has helped us start conversations that have been in the making for so long, but it puts it in a much more accessible way, and it helps people see that it's not as complicated as we think it is. It's just that it's a tough pill to swallow, and some people, the Letties of the world, are not going to want to accept that this is a reality. This is a book that deals with student revolutions and studies colonial resistance, and it also talks about the effects and the consequences of colonizing a culture and completely destroying somebody's cultural independence and taking over completely without respecting where these things come from. One of my favorite aspects of this book is how it tackles colonization from the point of view of the colonized, and it's written about in such a way that you're just left gobsmacked. You're kind of like, I can't believe what I'm reading. Like, this is what I've been living through all of these years. I just didn't know that there were words for this. I didn't know that other people's experiences could be so close to my own. It also tackles the darkest parts of academia and just how prejudiced history books are. Apart from all of those aspects that R of Kuang tackles, she also gives us one of the most beautiful and complex cast of characters that I've had the honor of reading about this whole year. Falling in love with them, experiencing life as they do, seeing the things that bring us closer together and the things that make us fall apart. It was just done in such a way that left me so impressed with the power that this book has over me. So many of these phrases and so many of these words are forever ingrained in my mind, and I don't see myself forgetting this story anytime soon or ever. And I do have a pretty bad memory, so me saying that means a lot. So there we go, Babel, Necessity of Violence, my #1 book of 2022, the best book that I've read this year. It's Babel. It's Babel. It's Babel. These are my top 10 books of 2022. Are you surprised? Are there any books you thought I would mention but I didn't? Let me know in the comments below what you think of my top 10 books of 2022, and also let me know what your favorite books of the year are. I would love to compare and contrast and maybe even get some recommendations for 2023. So definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed finding out what my top 10 books of 2022 are. If you're still here, leave this emoji in the comments below so that I know you stayed until the end and you support me and my channel. If it weren't for you guys, this channel would not be alive. So I have a lot to thank you guys for. And once again, I hope you enjoyed. I love you all so very much, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Hey Jimmy, you nice. Keep going.